So 2015 is going to be a watershed year. A majority of countries will be convening in New York at the United Nations General Assembly to agree a set of universal sustainable development goals, which is going to chart the future of this planet. A key goal among the 17 that have been agreed so far is education. But education can be a double-edged sword. It can be a tool for peace, but as we have seen from history, it can be a weapon for conflicts. So the way we design and implement our education systems is critical. It is a tool that influences mindsets. And it's the mindsets that basically decide whether we're going to go for peace or whether we want to go for war. So we look at our present system, our education system. I would call one of the most resilient systems. It hasn't changed for the last 200 odd years. It has done a very good job on numeracy and literacy, although still the majority of children do not have access to education, and rightly so, we should focus on that. But as we go into the 21st century, new challenges and problems emerge, as we have seen. Conflicts. We don't see wars at the global level, but we see a rising surge of conflicts at local and regional levels, and a rising casualty among children and women. The civilian population is at risk. So we need to look at our education systems. What is missing from our present education systems is a more humanistic education system. And I'm happy to say that a document that emerged from the 2015 World Education Forum organized by UNESCO, held in Incheon, South Korea, brought out a document, I think a seminal document, called Rethinking Education. And it calls for such a change. An education system which equips students with the soft skills of empathy, understanding, tolerance. Teaches them to be citizens of the world as well. So these are important skills that we need to incorporate into our education systems. The first problem that I would like to highlight with the education system is that the focus has been primarily on, as I said earlier, numeracy and literacy. That has created a very individualistic society versus focusing on the collective. The second problem that we need to address is the way we monitor and assess success among our students. It's primarily focused on assessing how much we know rather than focusing on how much we know how to use what we know. And that's a subtle difference, but it's an important difference. And our assessments have to change accordingly. So this brings me to the Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Education for Peace and Sustainable Development, where we have taken on these challenges and we have developed what I call, and I think, a very innovative program. We've taken one, games for learning, where we want to instill the notion of fun back into the education system, where children's dopamine levels rise because they are actually learning. They're learning things that they find exciting. Second, we have what we call the Libre program. And this is, let me say what this stands for. It's another acronym. It's learning through issue-based and reverse embedding. That's a mouthful, but what it basically means is we take some of the major problems that we are facing today, such as climate change. Let me give you an example how this works. So let's look at climate change. It's a major issue right now. So he says, what is climate change? And you start to understand some of the dynamics that creates climate change. And to understand climate change, you need to know some chemistry. It takes you into a chemistry module. And you look at sort of things that are important and taught in chemistry that are relevant to a problem that society faces. Similarly, you need to understand mathematics, because the way climate change occurs, you need to know differential calculus. It takes you into a calculus module. And a student sort of says, now he realizes why calculus is so important, because he needs that to understand this phenomena that we are facing today. So in that way, it becomes relevant, it becomes exciting. The third that I would like to do is talk about the transformative learning labs that we have created. Students learn a lot from each other. So let's get them to have a dialogue process, a discourse. Students from different socio-economic, cultural, racial backgrounds coming and discussing about an issue that they find a common issue. An example could be migration. It would be interesting to find out the perspectives of migration from students coming from Syria, as what we see today, versus students in Germany who are accepting them. How do they see migration? And also to look at how migration patterns have changed over the last 200 years. It's not a recent phenomenon, like many that have been made to think. Migration has been on there for the last, more than 1,000 years. But at the scale that is happening is what makes it different from the past. And then the fourth program that we call it is the YES piece. It stands for Youth on Education for Sustainable Development and Peace. Over here, we take every youth as a leader. Want to instill the fact that every youth has the capacity to motivate change. And they don't have to look for a couple of leaders to lead. We need the future generation to think along those lines, as every one of them is a leader. And so these are the kind of the main programs that MGIEP is taking on. Now, young people are ready for change. They've always been ready for change, but I think we have the empirical evidence to suggest this. MGIEP just surveyed 6,000 students in India. And the one common recurring theme that emerges from the survey is that they are hungry for change. They want change. They want change in the way they learn. They want change in the way the classrooms are designed. They want change in the way access is available for children with difference learning. They want equity in the classroom. So there is a drive for change. I want to end with the good news is that the global community is ready for this change. And we have these universal sustainable development goals that would guide and support this change. So with a closing remark, let's mobilize the youth to facilitate this change in our education systems.